In this video I'm going to install a new transverse leaf spring for the Rogue Rat Rod. Coming right up. Hey, how's it, Oaks? And welcome back to Rat Rods for Africa. And welcome to the new subscribers. Very happy to have you guys on board. If you don't know me, my name is Liv de Villiers. I run a small one-man shop out here in the middle of the forest where I realize rusty beams. So I finally got my custom-made transverse leaf spring from the spring manufacturers. Here in South Africa you can't buy these things off the shelf like you guys in the States can, so you count yourself lucky. So I had to give them specifications as to what I wanted. There should be a link up here on the screen somewhere where you can see a video about that. So yeah, I'm not entirely satisfied with the spring. I think they could have done a better job. For a start, these sharp ends could have been rounded over, etc. But I'm going to install it. The original spring here, something I had here, very stiff, very little travel, gives a terrible ride. So hopefully we can do better with this one. I'm going to put it in, see how we go, what we get, might have to modify things. Let's find out. So yeah, I've got the chassis sitting on the wooden blocks. So the front wheels are actually just off the ground. And I'm going to start by taking out these bolts to get the spring out. I've got the chassis supported on wooden blocks. So the front axle is actually hanging in the air. So I'm going to start by undoing the U-bolts that holds the spring in place. And now I can just step down the U-bolts. Take my spacer pieces out now. They're not going to have a job any further. I can just pull out the bolts holding the spring onto the shackles. That's one out, and out is the old spring. You can see here the spring I had in there had almost no arch. So one thing that I immediately see, which is actually makes sense, is that the eye to eye distance is different with the new one. Put them like that, which would make sense because as you get weight added here, it will move out. So this of course means that it's not going to fit on my existing shackles. I'm going to have to make new shackles that are longer. Okay, I'm going to have to do another slight modification. On the old spring, that hole in the middle is actually 12 millimeters or about half an inch, which is actually too big for a spring of this width. It's only about 50 mil, 2 inches, because it actually creates a weak spot right here. The new spring is better because the hole is only 8 mil. On the car I've got a M12 thread tapped, so the bolt went through the springs and it screwed into the plate. Of course now I can't do that, but I don't need to bolt this to the car as long as it locates, and this point is hopefully central because it centralizes the spring. So as long as my hole there is of this diameter, I will be fine. This measures 13 inches, which is good because I've currently got a M12 hole tapped, so I can just open it up a little bit to 13 millimeters, and then this will locate nicely and it will center the spring. Okay, these holes are for the U-bolts. That hole there is tapped M12. I took this bolt from the old spring. The new spring has only got a M8 bolt, but I've measured the head of that cap screw, which is 13 millimeters. So I'm just going to drill out this hole to 13 millimeters, and then the spring's not going to bolt to this anymore. Okay, so now the center bolt head of the spring should locate right there, and it's a nice tight interference fit. That's great. I've got my spring temporarily clamped in place just to evaluate things. These shackles are now too short. I need to obviously make them longer, but we need to look at things like not only the shackle length, but also shackle angle. Where is the shackle going to sit? When the spring gets loaded by the static weight of the car, this point will obviously move more that way, because the spring arch will become less. I think maybe I should just make a drawing so we can all understand it better. So instead of a drawing, I made the board of springs for better understanding. This represents the front axle. Here is my high-tech spring that can even work. And currently we've got that. The front axle is effectively standing on the ground. This point is attached to the car. The car is actually standing on jack stands, so it can hang just like that. I've made some shackles. So let's try one scenario. So if I were to make the shackle lengths to what the current setup is, or the way the car is positioned, that's pretty much what I will have. When I take the car off the jack stands, I'm going to add static weight to the spring, and the spring is going to be sort of preloaded, and it will go down some and sort of settle at some point. I don't exactly know at what point, but it will definitely go down, and obviously these points move further apart from each other when that happens. So that will be pretty much more or less what it will look like with the car sitting at rest, all jack stands removed. If I go through a suspension movement or through a hole in the road, that's what will happen. But there's a problem here. Look at this. This shackle is almost vertical now, same that side, and now it's very easy to have lateral movement. So at that position, the front axle could actually move from side to side very easily. That's definitely not a good scenario. There's also another possible issue, depending on your setup here. At the very extreme, your spring could actually foul your spring perch. So yes, this scenario with the sort of shackle angles sitting at almost or close to vertical is definitely not a good setup. Let's remove these long shackles. And now we are back to where we started. Let's jack the car up some more, which means the spring will go up to there, and we stop at that point where the eyes are in line with the eyes on the spring perch. This position is actually the position where we will get the shortest shackle length. for this particular setup. We can't get it shorter than that. If we go up further, it becomes longer again. The distance here. Go down, it becomes longer again. So the position where the distance here is the shortest is when they are all in line. The shorter shackles, as we've just figured out. One there and one there. More or less, there we go. Now we take the car off the jack stands again so that the weight of the car sits on the spring, and something like this will happen. The spring starts preloading and it settles. Now our shackle angles are much better. If we suspend, go through the suspension movement, you can see the angles are better. Because everything is under tension, sideways movement is much improved and will be very little, if at all, when we have this setup. So common sense tells me that I must go for a scenario like this and have the shortest possible shackle length given what I've got. I'm not saying you should have the shortest shackle length possible at all, but remember, in my case, that point and that point is now fixed. That point and that point is also fixed, because the length of this lever will also affect geometry, but I've got no choice now, because that is fixed and that is fixed and this distance is fixed. You can actually calculate this length by simply measuring the center to center distance from spring perch to spring perch, measuring the center to center distance of the spring eyes from there to there. That would be in the unloaded condition, and then I subtract that distance, the spring eye distance, from the spring perch distance, divided by 2, and then I will get that distance. So you know how mechanics like to blame the engineers and swear at the engineers when it's a difficult or an inaccessible bolt. Can't get this out. My tie rod is in the way. And what do you do if you are both the mechanic and the engineer? Who do you blame now? So I had to go through the whole freaking drama of taking off the tire and getting that tie rod end off, just so I could get these shackles removed. So I have to look really carefully, but you can see I've got a ruler lying there to measure the distance between the two spring perches from center to center. That would be from that point to that point. Measuring eye to eye distance on the spring is a lot easier. I measured 755 millimeters from spring perch to spring perch. I measured 604 millimeters from the center of the spring eyes, from there to there, 604. So 755 minus 604 gives me 151. If my maths are any good, I divide it by 2 and I get 75.5 millimeters. So that would be the shackle distance from center to center. If you're watching from the States, I'm sorry, all this is in millimeters. If you want to know this in inches, you'll have to divide these figures by 25.4. I can't tell you straight off what it is. I do know that 75 millimeters is roughly 3 inches. So the old shackles measures around 55 millimeters center to center. I'm gonna make new sets exactly the same, except now that will move to 70. I'm gonna make a 76 millimeters center to center. I made my shackle plates out of some 40 by 6 flat bar, because that's what I had on the shelf. to my American friends. That's about 1.5 inch wide by 1/4 inch thick. So now I must just install them. I've had to maneuver things a little bit to get everything in place, but they should be going now. So far so good. Now where is that other bolt? Here we go. Now let's see if it lines up. So I'm sure you're not interested in watching me fight with bolts and holes and lining things up. Excuse me. So I switched the camera off, but I've got it in place now. You can see on both sides. They're sitting pretty much horizontal, which is exactly what I wanted. I still got to tighten them up. There's a view. The car is still sitting on blocks. So the spring is, and the axle is actually hanging in the air at the moment. There's no wheels on it. So the spring has got no load, it's no compression. So I think what I'm going to do now is get the wheels on and take the blocks off. Let's see what she looks like. It should be quite exciting. I haven't got the center U-bolts in place yet. If you look there, you can see I've just got some clamps holding the spring where it is located with that center bolt. So it should be fine for now. Okay, I got the wheels back on. So I'm now going to jack it under the front axle, and then the spring will start compressing. Let's see how it goes until we get to a point where we will lift off of the blocks. Which is about there. So I'm just going to pull out the blocks quickly. And drop it down so we can see what we've got. There we go. Look at that shackle angle. It's about 45 now. Maybe even a slightly past, could be 50. But yes, imagine, and I started to remember at completely horizontal. So yeah, that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. Can you imagine where it would have ended up if I'd made the shackle longer? So yeah, that's good. I like it. Okay, let me put some weight on the car and jump it up and down. Yeah, it's a definite improvement over what I had. That previous spring was so stiff. There was no movement. Yeah, I'm pretty happy. Look, you can even see the lady leg friction shock starting to work. Nice. So I've got to still sort out the center U-bolts and then that's done. I think I'm pretty happy. What I enjoy about this whole front suspension here is that everything here is for forest engineering. Nothing was bought from a catalog or a speed shop or anything. So yeah, it just shows you can do this if you want to. You don't need to buy parts from anywhere. It's just dedication and persistence. So there are two issues with the U-bolts. They're too long, so the thread doesn't go far enough. The space is too much. But if you look carefully, you will see the existing threads are also very worn. So now I've decided to discard these, and I've just made up this bracket plate which will serve the same function. So I'm going to use that, and it will look like that when it's fitted. I think it's going to work well. I don't have the right bolts at the moment. You never do. So those bolts are just temporary. But yes, once I get the right bolts, I'll just bolt it in place finally. Hey, thanks for watching. I'll see you oaks next time. Have a good one.